From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
It's time to move on from Chris Olave. If I'm the New Orleans Saints and I'm Mickey Loomis, I'm calling around other teams around the NFL, especially teams like the San Francisco 49ers or, heaven forbid, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if you're a Saints fan. I'm calling up teams to see if they have interest in Chris Olave, see what you got. Because at this point, I'm done. I've been done for a little while now, but I want to give it more time because I still want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm done. I've had enough with Chris Olave being in a New Orleans Saints uniform. And I know this is coming off a week where he actually looked solid on the stat sheet, having 6 catches, 98 yards, even on the opening drive on the first or second play against the New England Patriots last Sunday, having a 53-yard catch. But the Chris Olave that the Saints and Saints fans thought they were getting back in his rookie season, back in his first 2 years in the NFL with the New Orleans Saints, no longer there. He's a completely different player from what he once was, and he's only gotten worse. He's not the consistent player that you were looking for in a guy. Chris Olave was taken in the top 15 of the NFL draft just a few years ago, and even, not only that, but was traded, the Saints traded up to the number 11 pick to go get him back in the 2022 NFL draft. The first 2 years were great. Put up over 1,000 yards. Had 1,042 and 4 touchdowns in his rookie year, and then had 1,123 and 5 tutties in 2023. So the first 2 years, putting up over 1,000 yards, that's good pedigree for a young receiver having instant impact. But ever since then, and even into that 2023 season, I've seen him start to decline and not be the player that we either thought he was going to be, or even the Saints thought he could be, or wanted him to be. At this point, the way that Chris Olave is for the New Orleans Saints is not the role that he is as an archetypal type of wide receiver. He's not a guy that commands the most respect on the outside. He's not a Jamar Chase. He's not a Justin Jefferson. He's not an A.J. Brown or any of these dominant outside wide receivers that we declare as wide receiver ones, but more often than not, you're kind of looking for a big body X type of receiver. Chris Olave is nowhere close to that. You can look at his build. Even if you want to look at the 6 foot, 187 pounds, he plays even weaker. I'm going to be honest. Chris Olave is not the guy that you think he is or could have been. Chris Olave is a good number 2 receiver, a complementary type of guy to maybe someone else that's bigger, better, and actually commands more from the other defense to pay attention to him. If you've watched him, he's gotten opportunity after opportunity after opportunity for the last few years. And what has happened? He either gets injured, gets tackled easily, he doesn't fight for the extra yards if anyone's near him. And speaking of if anyone's near him, he cannot make a contested catch. I think the last time, trying to go back in my brain, the last time that Chris Olave had a contested catch, and especially one that was down the field, was back in week 2 or 3 of Monday Night Football in 2023. That was the last time that I can recall a big-time catch from Chris Olave, especially in a big-time moment. Since then, I have not seen it. Now, 2024 was basically wiped from existence in a way because of the injuries, but that further plays into the fact that this guy, I don't want to declare him as injury prone, but it's not only me, I'm sure a lot of you also have these injury concerns with Chris Olave. He's been good so far this season. He hasn't had really any injury concerns. But if you watch him play, there are so many times where if a guy is near him, he doesn't go out to try and actually catch the ball. He kind of plays more conservative, more scared in a way. And even when he gets the ball, and let's say he's in the open field, the thing about Chris Olave is He's so easy to tackle. He's not elusive in any way. He won't juke you or spin or try to hurdle or try to run you over. He doesn't do any of those things. And even if he tries to go out of bounds, I even go back to last Sunday's game against the New England Patriots. I forget who it was, but it was near the sideline. And I don't know if it was a safety or a linebacker. But Chris just kind of fell out of bounds and basically got thrown out of bounds from the back of his jersey with one hand from the safety or the linebacker, whichever Patriots player it was. To me, it was crazy how easy. Momentum was a part of it, but it's still crazy to me. A grown man got thrown by another grown man so easily by one hand, and it's not like the Patriots defensive player was overwhelmingly bigger than him, and I mean like defensive lineman. Like, no, it was probably a solid-sized linebacker, maybe even a safety. But even then, the way he got thrown so easily out of bounds, after kind of trying to carry his momentum out the field, just somehow gets thrown by the wayside out of bounds, that's very concerning to me. And look, Chris does not have the traits that you would need for him to be a number one wide receiver. And the thing is, the Saints, the way it's coming up right now, they have to move on from him unless he is just willing to take a lesser role. Because as of right now, Spencer Rattler and company, they're trying to give him every opportunity they can. But if you've watched any of these Saints games and you've watched Chris Olave play wide receiver, not only this year, but the last couple of years, he is not the same, and he's not the guy that you would be looking for a quote-unquote wide receiver one. He doesn't have any of the traits of anything that I've already described, but he also doesn't come up with any of the clutch catches. He doesn't make big-time plays when you need him to. He doesn't get necessarily the separation as often as you would want him to, especially back in the past. He doesn't have like any type of leadership type of role or traits that you would look for personality-wise. He's much more reserved, but also no one goes to him, and no one has that type of respect to be like, oh, Chris Olave's talking in the locker room, or he's stepping up in some way, or people don't look to him, or at least I don't see it, as an example of, oh, Chris is doing this, so I got to do that same thing if I want to replicate being successful in the NFL. None of those things happen with Olave as a New Orleans Saints wide receiver. And the way that the Saints have him, they have to have him as a wide receiver one because they don't have anyone else to really rely on to be a dominant guy. Now, the thing is, I think they want to give some opportunities to some other guys, though. Because if you recall from this offseason, they traded for not one, but two wide receivers. They traded actually with the Patriots right before the season, or at the beginning part of the season, and they got Jalen Polk. Now, Polk isn't going to play this entire season at all. They got put up, he had surgery, he's going to be out for the year. But coming into 2026, completely different story. And the thing with Polk is, he's got somewhat of a similar build in a way, because he's also 6 foot. He's actually more 6'1", so he's slightly taller, and he actually weighs about 20 more pounds than Chris Olave, so he's a lot more solidified. He's not as easy to tackle and get thrown out of bounds like we've seen him. Now, do I think necessarily Jalen Polk is a dominant number one X wide receiver? No. But I do think he's got traits, especially from what I had seen back in his Washington Husky days, that I like his potential. And he's also going to cost us. A big part of this is the financial side. The fact that Chris Olave has not one but two 1,000-yard seasons within his rookie contract and was taken in the first round, and not only the first round, but a top 12 pick, that's going to garner some money. That's a big thing that Chris Olave and his agency is going to have on his side to actually earn money, especially when you look at the wide receivers nowadays. My big question to you is, how much would you actually want to pay Chris Olave? Because the thing is, come up with an answer real quick as I talk. But if you look at a lot of the wide receivers right now, and especially guys where I would consider him in somewhat of a similar tier, just use a recent example, because the market for wide receivers is only increasing. We've seen the top tier guys, so I'm not necessarily comparing Chris Olave to these top tier guys, but we've seen some guys Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Some of the top wide receivers in the NFL are earning north of or even $40 million. I already know you're not going to want to pay Chris Olave $40 million, but if you're more in the 20-ish range, like 20 to 25, let me tell you, that's not going to be enough, because you even look at guys like Jamison Williams, who's a wide receiver 2 for the Detroit Lions offense and doesn't get used as often or doesn't have the role or expectation that Chris Olave would have in a Saints offense. He's making $26 million per year. So you're going to, and he also wasn't taken as high as Chris Olave was. So you factor in all those, the stats that Olave put up at the beginning of his career, the draft capital the Saints put into him, and the wide receiver market as a whole, you're probably going to be expecting either north of or $30+ million per year for Chris Olave. My question to you, Who Dat Nation, and everyone that's listening, if you were Mickey Loomis or you were just the GM of the New Orleans Saints, are you comfortable giving Chris Olave an extension where on a per year average he's making north of or $30+ million? Because to me, absolutely not. Get him out of here. Now, I know no matter what happens, because of the way the Saints are in leverage, timing, and the team that he would go to and the situation all plays factors. But the likelihood, let me tell you, you're not going to get a first. You're more likely than not going to get a second. Kind of hard pressed to get a third, but you may be able to, depending on the timing and the situation and the leverage that you may have. Chris Olave would need to definitely put up some more stats to be more productive, to make him look more enticing. But let me tell you, you're not going to get anywhere near the capital that you invested into Chris, because the Saints did trade up a couple of spots to go get Olave back in 2022. So because of all of this, you're not the returns that you're going to get on the investment that you made back just a handful of years ago. It's not going to equate, so you're not going to be fully happy. But let me tell you, in the long run, it would make more sense. You've already seen the Saints make multiple moves to go get guys that would be a lot cheaper. I've heard a lot of talk about the Saints potentially trading Rashid Shaheed. To me, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you trade a guy who doesn't cost you a whole lot? Right now, he's costing you about $5.5 million for his extension, and it's coming up soon as well, much like Chris Olave, who also needs a contract extension, which is why you're running out of time. But Shaheed will not cost even a fraction of what Chris Olave would cost you. And here's the thing. Chris Olave isn't even your number one receiver stat-wise. You look at the New Orleans Saints, and you look at the receiving leaders in 2025 so far, through 6 games, with this Saints 1-5 start. Chris Olave is technically number one because of that 98-yard game, and you had a pretty pedestrian game. Rashid Shaheed only had a handful of yards. But going into the game, Rashid Shaheed was up by like 40 yards. Right now he has 316, has more big plays, and also has more touchdowns than Chris Olave. And this is coming off of less receptions, but catches significantly more targets. Each game, Chris Olave is dropping not one, but multiple, sometimes even 3 or 4 passes per game based on the targets. He's got 39 receptions on 64 targets. That is unacceptable for a guy that's supposed to be the number one receiver. And for anyone that is saying that it's getting rid of Chris Olave would be detrimental to Spencer Rattler's development, no, it's not. No, it's not. Now, look, Spencer Rattler's looked good. I actually like the way he's looked at, and I think he's definitely made some progress. I take nothing from year one, where he had the 6 starts and was in 7 appearances and lost all of them and didn't get his first win until 2 weeks ago. I take 2024 out the window. I don't care about that. And here's the thing. I think because Spencer feels like he needs to throw it to Chris Olave to try and get some connection, because Chris is talented, don't get me wrong. Chris Olave is a talented wide receiver. But the role that he is in for the New Orleans Saints does not fit his skill set in the way he plays football. He is not a number one. He's a good complement to someone else. But because he's a square peg in a round hole type of situation, it's just not fitting. So why would you continue to force yourself into this type of situation when it's obviously not working? If he could go to someone else, maybe Jalen Polk in 2026, or maybe if you trade him, you could look at the other wide receiver that Mickey Loomis traded for this season in Devon Vele, who actually is a quote-unquote big body receiver that you could actually rely on in these jump ball situations. Maybe he's got something, but we don't know because he's buried behind Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks. All three guys are basically the same archetype of wide receivers. Field stretchers that can't really catch jump balls. They can create separation because of their speed, but outside of that, they're somewhat limited in a way in the routes that they could run. They usually like to run more deep routes, but they're forced to run shorter routes because this offense is limited as a whole. The fact that they have guys that are too similar, their top three guys are the same exact guy, it's not working. You need someone else to balance out in other ways for different types of situations. Devon Vele, I'm not going to say he's a world beater, but he's someone that you could look at as a potential guy to work out for the future. Who knows if it's going to work, but you don't know until you actually give him more reps. Because if you look at his snap percentage, it's unbearingly low. He gets maybe 1 or 2 catches a game and only plays 20, 30, maybe 40% of the snaps. And 40 sounds high to me based off of how often we've seen Devon Vele actually on the field for the New Orleans Saints. So even though you invested so much back in 2022, the way that it has gone, you're just going to have to take your L if you're Mickey Loomis, in my eyes, and help fix this for the long term. Because if you extend Chris Olave and you pay him the $30 million, where's the rest of the money going to go whenever you have to extend other guys? Because Brian Bresee, he's going to be needing an extension soon too. You've got other guys that you're going to also have to extend at some point as well. And let me tell you, you're not going to be able to, because if you do eventually find a quarterback, you would have to pay them, and then you're paying top dollar or near top dollar to a wide receiver who isn't working out for you. It's just not going to work, and the way the team is built will still be wrong, and we will still be looking at the Saints and being like, why do they suck? Because they are not building the team correctly. You're just going to have to take the L, Mickey Loomis, and trade Chris Olave, whether it's for a 3rd or a 4th round pick, and maybe you have to throw in a late rounder as well to get it done. But let me tell you, this will work out in the long run, especially if you can hit on these picks and start building this team more well-rounded with playmakers all around and have positive development to where you're not putting money and doubling down on guys that you banked on before because you traded extra draft capital to go and get them. Sometimes you just have to say, I was wrong on this, instead of trying to double down and be like, maybe it'll work in the end. Because how often have we seen that work? How often have we seen that work? The New Orleans Saints move on from Chris Olave, give some of these other young guys a chance, and get some sort of draft capital back on Olave before it's too late. We appreciate you tuning in to another edition of Cleats and Sneaks. If you want to listen to more podcasts like my own, or even listen to other podcasts such as the 4 Tire Change podcast with Dawson Iserlo talking NASCAR, or even listen to some of our local content here on our radio station, ESPN Southwest Louisiana, or listen to some of our coaches' interviews or any of our other local original content, you can check it out. Subscribe to ESPN Southwest Louisiana. But until then, I'll talk to you next time.